A View to a Kill is now 40 years old and remains one of the most entertaining and bombastic entries in the series. We gathered together to discuss why we love the film so much, and it was great to have so many of you contribute with your thoughts. Right, something that I know people complain about all the time, Stacy we'll move on to. The defence is that, well, nowadays most Bond girls have to be, oh, I'm Bond's equal and all this and that. And well, to be fair, it started really, didn't it, you could say Anya Amasova onwards, there was that thread. But she's just a civil servant, she just works in City Hall. What do you expect from this woman? What's so bad about Bond coming in and helping her? But she helps Bond as well. So I think it's just the screaming. I genuinely think people, they just hear that and then they can't stand it. And they just judge her on that.
I don't think anybody's pretending that she's even one of the most eminent geologists in the world. I think she even says herself that it was her father's company, and based around that, she then studied geology in preparation for taking over the company. So that's not to say that she's this foremost expert in what she's talking about. She might have just had a vested interest in it and have a background in geology.
You were telling me about your grandfather.
He left Sutton Oil to Dad, who expected me as the only child to take it over someday. So, at college, I studied geology.
And then what happened?
Zorn. He took over Sutton Oil in a rigged proxy fight. I fought him in the courts. It's taken everything I had, all the cash, the furniture, everything. So I took this job as state geologist, and I've just managed to hold on to this house and my shares.
It doesn't seem particularly far-fetched for me. Not when you really compare it to Christmas Jones in World Isn't Enough, who I love, by the way.
Yeah, good.
But, I think there is this, if we have a spectrum of expertise, I think Stacey is probably, it's fair to say she's probably on the other side of that, really. And I think the criticisms against Stacey are very harsh most of the time. Yes, I mean, the screaming, especially in the fire section in the lift, can be a bit grating, but
Help me! Catch! No! Wait!
Aside from that, I think she's a perfectly functional Bond woman, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that as well, because the script is so well written for her. Like, she's not, when they're in the mine and they're in like the workers' hut and they've discovered that kind of map on the table and she's explaining to Bond about the geology. Yes, she's explaining about geology, but it's nothing it's the way that it's written. It's not making it sound cleverer than it needs to be.
Yeah,
it's basically she's explaining things in layman's terms.
Yeah.
So she's not trying to sound like a very kind of, stiff upper lipped geologist who's kind of, oh, no, this is,
These green lights, they're Zorn's oil wells. The ones he's been using to pump seawater into the Hayward Fault.
What are these tunnels for under these lakes?
These lead straight into this section of the San Andreas Fault. Zorn just has to blast through the bottom of these lakes to flood the fault.
And create a double earthquake?
Yes. Except right beneath us is the key geological lock that keeps the faults from moving at once.
She's being very down to earth, very speaking in, layman's terms, and I think it's just testament to the script. I get the screaming thing, and it's the husky James. It's all of that. I understand people's criticisms in that regard, but I think, to your point, George, she's someone that's gone into the family business at the end of the day. That's the way it comes across to me. As you mentioned, her father was a geologist, and she's kind of gone down that route as well. But yeah, I think it comes down to the script. It's just written brilliantly for her, and it's not over the top in that regard. I think as other characters in the Bond franchise, you could argue the other way, but I think she was great.
And a bit like the age gap with Melina, people just can criticize that, but both of those, Bond's not hitting on them at all, as far as I can see. There's this lovely scene where he stays awake, doesn't he, guarding her bed. There's no, and he puts the sheet over her. It's only both those films. It's only in the very last scene that the snogging, isn't it? But apart from that, there's absolutely no sort of suggestion of romance. I mean, some might say that seems a bit added on. Fair enough. I know people say that about Wei Lin, don't they? But there's clearly, there's a bit of time gone on, as I always say. It's not like the next second after they've come down from the Golden Gate Bridge. But because of what's happened, they've got that closeness because they've had so much stuff go on together. And no one's saying that they're going to end up long term, are they? I mean, goodness me.
No, but it's quite a romantic scene, with the quiche and her sort of dressing up for it, Bond making a meal for someone, and then the fact that nothing happens after that is really interesting, and there's something quite sweet about it, I think. I mean, he does look he looks a lot older than her and everything, but again, it's not something that's ever caused me a problem. And as you say, Tom, not every Bond girl, Bond woman needs to be his equal. They can be, someone that just happens to be, she's unluckily involved in all this. It's very unfortunate for her, but that's interesting. It's good writing having someone. Yeah. How has this person become involved in it? And of course, the screaming might be annoying in the city hall, but she probably would be screaming if she's in a fire down an elevator shaft and stuff. So yeah, I love Stacy, and it's very very kind of 80s what she looks like and stuff, but and the music helps a lot as well. That Wine with Stacy, and then it's Bond meets Stacy, and then Wine with Stacy, isn't it? I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful.
She does get a lot of undue criticism in this film for being over the top. But the thing is, if you actually look at her role, if you actually pan out slightly and then look at her entire character arc, she does what she says on the tin. She does nothing more, and she aspires to do nothing less. And that's what's so good about her. She's a civil servant, like you've said. She's in this role that was bequeathed to her. She doesn't necessarily want to be where she is, but she's getting by just about. And then suddenly this suave secret agent who pretends to be from the Financial Times, James, all this.
I'm Stacy. Sutton.
Yes.
And you're a reporter. What was it?
Stop. James Stop.
Right.
Yes, I am researching an article on Zorin. Why, used a friend's name to get an invitation to the chateau.
This braggadocio reporter turns up and then just suddenly completely usurps her livelihood. But yeah, she would be screaming if she was stuck halfway up a burning elevator shaft. I mean, I know I would. I know I'd be bricking it, that's for sure. I think she's great. And what I've got to say as well, shout out to her, what a wonderful woman in real life. She was the most down-to-earth, lovely actress, and her loss is in the Bond community. And there was all that tragedy as well around the misunderstanding of her passing. And I just thought the whole end to her life was so unbelievably tragic. And again, the scene Matt mentions about obviously the quiche and the cooking and the music, it's almost fatherly.
Et voila. Quiche de cabinet.
Sounds interesting. What is it?
An omelette.
And I think that's a really loving and tender scene. And it just goes to show that, yes, Bond is a womanizer. He is a ladies' man. But he's not always like that.
Yeah. That was delicious.
I think some of the scenes that they share are some of the most beautiful in the franchise.
Yeah, absolutely, Kieran. I totally agree. I put it down as him being avuncular. He's caring, he's nurturing at that particular point in time, and he doesn't creep on her in any way. He protects her, and I totally agree with your sentiments there. Absolutely.
I think it's similar to Cara, and again, she for some reason gets so much criticism. They're both civilians, but the way they're written in is really interesting because Bond is told off. A bit like Cara. It's like, yes, I heard you. Didn't do it because you saw a beautiful woman and all that. With this, it's we're on a mission. When he sees her from the balcony. But no, Bond's right. There's something sus about this that is absolutely crucial to the mission. bit like Cara, he was right to think, hang on, this isn't what's a woman doing at the back? This is really good. And yes, of course, they're fanciable, and Bond will. But Bond, you got to use everyone, man or woman, to help his mission, hasn't he? Which eventually is to try and undermine Zorin. So he doesn't know. Then we don't know as an audience. She could be in on it with Zorin. She could be a baddie for all we know at that stage. And that brilliant bit of detective work with his gadget, with a check. It's so Bond, isn't it? The silly glasses, fair enough, but as John says, his grand's glasses. But yeah, I think they look great. Anyway, but then by the end of it, Cara is riding a horse and going off a jeep for a civilian, and Stacey's on the top of the Golden Gate Bridge. I can't think of anything scary. It's incredible. Dear me, give her some respect, ladies and gentlemen. I think.
Stacy, jump! Get a foothold!
I know there's been quite a few criticisms of this film throughout over the years. Some things that are probably fair and some things that are unfair, but what I'll say is I just think this is an absolutely brilliant Bond film with so much to love in it that whilst there may be some criticisms that could be fair, it's not a reason to rag on this film because the good far, far, far outweighs the bad. After On Her Majesty's Secret Service, A View to a Kill has the best score in the series, and I think it's no coincidence that those two go hand in hand, because View to a Kill, clearly the score uses the bass line from Majesty's in part of its score. But what an amazing score in terms of, you look at the bits, you've got your stuff like He's Dangerous and your snow job stuff, but then you've also got very massive crescendo pieces, especially like when the San Francisco coming down the ladder. It's the score that's doing the heavy lifting, and it has the perfect emotional beats with parts like Wine with Stacy. And of course, the score is only one of the reasons why the score is only so good is because the song, for me, After Majesties is the best in the series. It's on a par with Live and Let Die. What an amazing song View to a Kill is. It's a song that both my kids love as well, something that we put on in the car. And one of the amazing things about it is how the score is interwoven into the film as well. Wine with Stacy being one of the perfect examples of taking what is a full-on rock song of the 80s and making it into this beautiful, slowed-down, romantic piece. And that is at the apex, let's say, of John Barry and Duran Duran collaborating to make something which is so very 80s, but so very timeless as well. And I adore the score and the song. I also adore the locations of this film. I'd say maybe after Moonraker, this might be my next favourite set of locations. I love that contrast of classy France to San Francisco. I don't know what it is about San Francisco, but San Francisco in films for me really, I don't know, brings something out of me. It's one of those places that I want to go, and I want to go because I've seen it in so many of my favourite films, in this clearly, in Mrs. Doubtfire, in The Rock. There is something about San Francisco that is magical. It's different from other American cities from what you see on screen. Obviously, it has the Golden Gate Bridge, which is the location of one of the best climaxes and one of the best villain deaths in the series. We can talk about Roger Moore and body doubles and stuff after. I know I'll bring it up, but let's never take away from the fact that to have James Bond fight a villain with an axe on the top of the Golden Gate Bridge, and the shots of like John Glen going up there and all the rest of it, how incredible is that? It's one of the best climaxes to a Bond film. I think thinking about it, that is something where View to a Kill really excels in, is the momentum shift. So I think I've heard a lot of criticism. I'm not sure I agree with them necessarily, but that a lot of Bond films, especially Roger Moore films, start really well and slow down. For me, I don't personally agree with that, but for this one, could never be said. This is probably the other way around. It starts potentially a bit slower, gives time to breathe with the stuff with the horses in France, and then it gets to San Francisco, and it builds up and it builds up. And the final 20 minutes, half an hour, the minute you get to that mine shaft and everything that comes after is absolutely sensational. The villains are some of the best in the series. I'm going to say Zorin, for me, is, with Sanchez and Scaramanga, the best villain in the series. He's completely psychotic, and Christopher Walken just looks like he's having a ball of a time throughout it. There's so many like little nuances in his performance that just add weight to it. One of the main things is the enjoyment he has out of death. Like the shooting of Mr. Howe, for example, which is such a harrowing scene, and he's so overawed with his own ingenuity, so to speak.
I would have to be
dead.
Intuitive improvisation, that kind of thing, that he loves it so much. And then even when he's dying and he's about to fall off the Golden Gate Bridge, that giggle. And that is the mixture of a really well-written character and a brilliant bit of acting from Christopher Walken. And again, that thing of John Glen, where he gives actors permission to do what they feel right with the character, and here is a perfect example of how it works so well.
You had Christopher Walken, though. Goodness me, you must have let him have fun with the role there.
Yeah, he was great, Christopher. I loved him. I'm trying to think of the film that I first saw him in.
Deer Hunter, wasn't it?
Deer Hunter.
Oh, yeah.
You see him in Deer Hunter. He was fantastic. And we were very, very fortunate to get him on the film. He was a very, very good actor and a very nice person to work with. He used to like to play little games sometimes. He would, like when we were shooting in Chantilly in France, we would put one of the junior assistant directors, keep an eye on Walken, because he likes to do a little walkabout. You stroll off for about a mile and get lost in the forest or something. So we said to him, "Here's the radio, keep an eye on him. Wherever he goes, you go." Okay. So of course, Walken, he's got one eye on this kid, and as soon as the kid sort of goes off to have a pee or something, he's off. He's lost in the woods somewhere, and we have to try and find him. But he used to play these little games, but that was fun. It was part of the way we used to make movies, I'm afraid.
However good Zorin is, and he is brilliant, he is perfectly complemented by Mayday as well. I'm not sure we've seen a female with this kind of physicality before in a Bond film. And I mean, she's a really interesting character, Mayday. On the surface, she's just as psychotic as he is. And yet, I'm not sure she is by the end. I'm sure actually that you get this more view that everything that she's done has been motivated by love for Zorin. And then he betrays her. And hell hath no fury like a woman. The only way that she is ever going to turn is if he deceives her, if he cheats, so to speak. And it's basically Mayday who becomes the hero piece and gives one of the most heroic deaths in the whole series. That look she gives when she comes out on that bomb and she just looks at Zorin just before she blows up, it speaks 1,000 words. One of the great things about this film is the deaths, and I know it's a really weird thing to say, but I've obviously said that Zorin's death is one of the best villain deaths. Mayday's death is a heroic death, but there's such diversity. You've got Tibbet, where you don't actually see fully what's happening, but you see it in the distance within the car wash. But then that image of him lying in the back of the Rolls Royce while James Bond catches up to the car and then realises he dies. It's so heartbreaking at the moment that a character that we love, what a great ally Tibbet is, that chemistry that Patrick Macnee and Roger Moore had from being friends for so many years, and it just came onto the screen, and in a lot of ways it's the perfect send-off for Roger's Bond. so to speak. But what a great death that is. But then you've got deaths of minor characters. Mr. Howe, what a horrible death, just to emphasise the psycho nature of Zorin. And I think that that's something that's been missed off the later films, is that we don't see these little moments of deaths of disposable characters that add so much to the main villain. And then we have Klotkoff's death, which, I mean, this guy's, a physiological freak, and all that. What a death, though. I mean, I remember I was watching as a kid, to see a guy going into a turbine and just being shredded is something so harrowing. But again, what is just a character with maybe one or two scenes is so memorable because of the death he's been given. And it's that imagination that John Glen brings to the screen, that Richard Maybrown brings to the writing, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic. I would say that this is by far and away the most 80s James Bond film. I'd say if you for me, the pinnacle of 60s Bond, probably Goldfinger. I know, but Thunderball obviously is when Bond Mania is happening. But I'd say the most 60s Bond is Goldfinger. The most 70s Bond is Spy Who Loved Me. But those are mainly because of iconography. The most 80s Bond for me is most certainly View to a Kill. It's not my favourite 80s Bond, but the styles in obviously the song Duran Duran, the styles in the hair, the music, the character actors, Grace Jones being a prime example, but likes of Fiona Fullerton, very synonymous with the 80s. This, to me, even Microchips in itself is something that is going on in the 80s. It's a film that's very embodied in the 80s, and some could argue that maybe that's why it's dated more than something like The Living Daylights, but that's okay. That's okay, because this represents a staple in time, and just like nanobots in No Time to Die will feel very dated in 20 years' time, that's okay because it's a part of this time, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The plot itself it recycles Goldfinger, and I've heard that as a criticism. That is no criticism. That's a brilliant thing. We're going to take an item, and that's going to be the thing that's going to push the plot forward. It's going to be a microchip, whereas in Goldfinger it was gold itself. And the idea that Zorin is going to blow up the San Andreas Fault, so Silicon Valley goes, so his microchips are worth so much more. Fine. It doesn't need to be anything different, because you've got the characters and you've got the action and you've got the location that is different. And that works for me. That is never, ever a problem for this plot. One thing why I'd say it's just outside my top 10 rather than super in it, because I love this film, is the Roger Moore issue. Not that Roger Moore's an issue. Sorry, that probably sounded a bit wrong. Roger Moore is always giving 100% on screen. Never doesn't as James Bond. He's the most game person there is for James Bond, and he always gives a great performance, and he gives great moments and great performance here. Then I don't want to sound ageist, because I don't think you can ever be too old to be James Bond, but I do think that possibly the way he looks, he does look older, and sometimes in that you've then got to find the balance of one way or another. So in pairing him with Patrick McNee as Tibbet is giving that kind of older vibe, and that's like seen in the fights with the Zorin's guards in Chantilly.
Much help.
Don't worry, it's all wrapped up.
And you think, oh right, okay, we're going with an older vibe, but then you contrast this with really young, fresh, hip villains like Zorin and Mayday, but also the idea that he sleeps with 4 women in this film, Roger, and they're all a lot younger, probably more than half his age in this. And it gives this contrast of what James Bond are they trying to portray here. And whilst with Roger's films as well, you're never expecting Roger to be doing the stunts. They are very... Well, they're just not even subtle about the stunt doubles in this film. They're happy to just show them as stunt doubles, and you have to believe it's Roger. And when you put it to something like The Living Daylights next, you do believe that when Timothy Dalton's doing stunts, you believe James Bond's doing them. Here, it does feel a bit like, oh, this could be a different person. They don't even hide it. But even with all these little quibbles, it doesn't take away the enjoyment of the film. It doesn't take away the performance. It doesn't take away what's going on screen. I just think, for my sake, I wish they'd have gone either one way or the other in terms of, we'll put all the cast older and recognise that Bond's older, or all the cast younger and recognise that there's a contrast there. And I think that split sometimes brings attention. But that's not to take away from what is an absolutely brilliant James Bond film with blimps, with Golden Gate bridges, with mine shafts and explosives, with climbing down City Hall and fires being set off there, with horse riding, with ingenuity like, opening up tire pumps to get air in. I don't know if it works, but it's just a great bit. Wonderful score, wonderful locations, wonderful film. And I remember seeing it in 2022 at the cinema and just remembering again, that film was made for the big screen. It is cinematic in what it is doing. And John Glen doesn't miss when it comes to James Bond films. Roger Moore doesn't miss when it comes to James Bond films. And you add in those characters, you add in that crew, you add in that score, and you have got an amazing Bond film. So happy anniversary, A View to a Kill.
For my money, arguably the Bond series pound for pound most entertaining film, or at least for me it's definitely in the conversation. I absolutely adore this film, absolutely adore it. Think about all the incredible ingredients and puzzle pieces that have gone together to make this utter feast of Bond, right? And I know there's detractors, and I acknowledge and see those detractors, and I just go, I don't care. I absolutely love it. I love that Moore is 58 in this movie. I think I'd probably be a little bit off-put in my mind if I think about him being any younger. I love the wilder choices, or what would be seen as the wilder choices, the mad choices that kept made in this period of the movies. I love them. I'm really unapologetic about them because they're happy mad choices, not like sad mad choices. And I just think of all these ingredients. I know I keep using that word, but like, you've got, right, the plot, the storyline, one of the most interesting and entertaining. Oh, okay. Think about the villains. Yep, arguably the most interesting and entertaining. Think about the locations. Yep, arguably the most interesting and entertaining. You could go on. The stunts. Yeah, pretty much the most interesting and entertaining. This film has so much of those core Bondian elements that we all really, really love. And it displays them with such glee. And this is at a time where, a James Bond film coming out is it's a world event when this comes out. This is like everything stops. A new Bond movie's coming out, and it's just great to look back at. I think the movie looks incredible. I love all the set design, costume design, the risks that it takes. I love Stacy. I know that people don't say Stacey's a weaker Bond lady. I don't agree with that in one bit, to be honest. Is she one of my favourites? Probably not, but we're still talking about 25 movies of great characters that I really, really love. So no, I just totally love this film. When I see it come on, I want to bathe in it. I feel so lucky that this was part of my childhood. I really do. I feel like when it was put on bank holidays and Sunday afternoons, that I was like right in the sweet spot. So obviously this being like 85, and me being, what was I was 2 when it came out, so obviously wasn't in the cinema, but you know, when I was like, when it came to like home screening and stuff like that, like either on, you know, video or on terrestrial, I was like right in the sweet spot of falling in love with Bond. And it's just absolutely great. This is everything I love about this series and this franchise. And it's done in a period when this was clearly a family effort. You've obviously got, you know, my favourite James Bond director, John Glen, doing John Glen things. And it's just an awful lot of fun. It's dark too. It has dark subtext at times. And some of it is deadly serious. But I think I'm going to close with a moment where this was on one Christmas and everyone was, you know, excited. You know, everyone was like, this was when I was a kid, sorry, so I must have been like 11. And everyone was excited about, you know, presents and the cacophony of the day. And this was just on quietly in the background. And everyone started to go quiet when Bond was in Howe's office. And then everyone was just like stone still when he was going down the steps with Stacy on his back, the ladder with Stacy on his back, and fanfare was ringing out. And he dropped the, you know, and when he slips and catches his footing, and everyone goes, oh, that noise happened in our living room. Oh! It was thrilling. It was utterly thrilling. The hero was doing hero stuff and we were all totally on board with it. And when James Bond is at his best, that is what he does. And yeah, for me, he does it an awful lot in A View to a Kill. Whoa. How did I do all of that about View to a Kill without talking about John Barry? I think that just tells you how much I enjoy of the different pieces of that movie. But anyway, John Barry, good grief. I just think some of this is some of the greatest action adventure movie scoring that you'll hear anywhere. The Golden Gate stuff is out of this world. Fanfare, as I mentioned, is absolutely out of this world. Snow Job, don't like the title. I think it's a bit full on, but it's incredible. Wine with Stacy, goodness me. Those 4 bits there are some of my favourite Bond music of all time, and they're in the same movie. So yeah, I had to mention it, had to throw it in there. John Barry, you flipping legend, I love you. Happy 40th of View to a Kill. I flipping love you.
Keep watching for the final part of the A View to a Kill 40th anniversary celebration.